morning. I'm Sarah Hoiland, Assistant Professor of Sociology, and this is Kathryn Gabriel, my Student Research Assistant.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Kathryn Gabriel. This is my third term in Hostos Community College, and I am hoping to enter the dental hygiene program this fall of 2015. Thank you.
Excellent.
Okay, so here's a little bit about how we designed this project. We are using our students as participants in the project. Sorry. And we have two Sociology 101 classes, one anthropology class, and one Psychology 110, which is a lifespan development course. So we are getting a wide range of students and a wide range of abilities, and one of the sociology classes is linked with EL class, so a lot of variability in who our participants are. And what we wanted to do is we're using iPads and Google surveys and our student research assistants to conduct this study. And our question is, if we repeatedly expose people to quantitative literacy exercises in the classroom, does that change their quantitative literacy abilities? Does it change how they feel about their own quantitative literacy? And do they get better at analyzing the pie charts that we have in our study? We decided to pick one kind of tool and the pie chart to use instead of trying to do too many things at one time. So we did pre and post tests, which one aspect is the subjective numeracy scale. That's a fancy way of saying it's students' beliefs about their own quantitative literacy, and also demographic information. Everything is anonymous. Only people who see the data are us, and we are not tracking individuals over time. We're just tracking the whole group over time. The 5 exercises are increasing in difficulty. We started out with 1 pie chart, and then 2 pie charts, and then 3, and then 4, and 5. And we decided that when you're scrolling down through the survey, you can't put the pie charts next to each other. So we decided when you get 4 and 5 pie charts, it would be good to have a handout like we've distributed that shows you the pie charts, and you can look at them in the handout, and so that would make it easier for the students to answer questions about the pie charts, we think. And we give multiple choice and short answer questions about the pie charts, just kind of like you had in the survey we just did.
Yeah, and a couple of the questions were directly from the subjective numeracy scale. The one about calculating a tip, how often do you speak in numbers? So those were part of a tool that we got from our literature review that was brought to us by our students. And also we tried to pick a topic, of course, of the pie charts that would interest the people in the room. So as you see the ones floating around, we picked pie charts from our respective textbooks in Lifespan, Introduction to Sociology, and Introduction to Anthropology. So they would be topics that hopefully garner the students' interest, if nothing else, and kind of get them to think about the numbers in a different way.
So the research that we conducted on the students to kind of go with their quantitative, to test their quantitative reasoning and quantitative literacy, were pretty much to kind of integrate what they already know on their real world and apply that to their reasoning in their classroom. So quantitative reasoning is the ability of the individual to apply basic mathematical skills in analyzing and interpreting real world information. So we're bringing the real world that they're exposed to into the classroom, kind of. And it is part of the daily decision making, even without the knowledge of the individual. So they don't know that they're using these quantitative reasoning on a daily basis. It requires college level students to be able to use data and interpret statistical graphs, draw all conclusions, and solve problems. So this is all with critical thinking. It's an important requirement for quantitative reasoning. It allows an individual to find answers and conclusions that are intellectual. These were all taken from a quantitative reasoning text from Elrod, and by applying all these real life things to quantitative reasoning, we bring that to the student in technology forms.
And so in designing this project, Professor Wolfe and I really wanted to ground the students with a basic reading about quantitative literacy. So this was put out by AAC&U, and it was just kind of a purview, right? That we have writing across the curriculum, math across the curriculum, that next is going to be quantitative reasoning is the next across the curriculum movement.
So for the next slide, this is a quoting from an article by Nathan Rowe. It's about beyond math skills. So according to him, there are 4 clear facets that define quantitative reasoning. First would be the command of basic math skills. The second would be the application of knowledge, the ability of the students to inculcate the concept of quantitative reasoning in solving daily problems. Communication, which is very important among students, both in the college level and also in the graduate level. So students must have the ability to interpret data provided and communicate the use of the data when giving out inputs and explanations. And another thing that is really very important, it should be a habit of mind. It should be part of the thinking process of every individual. Like previously what Chris said, they do it without even knowing it. So it's about practice, it's about just letting them know that quantitative reasoning is a part of their daily lives.
So to sort of conclude this second project we're working on, we're just starting to gather the data. In fact, this morning I had an email from Kate at 4:45. I've got the results, right? Like, here's what we have. And so we're very excited. Certainly this is something that, all colleges and universities are looking at in terms of, how can we start to integrate different aspects of quantitative reasoning in subject areas that aren't traditionally quantitative? Sociology probably less than psychology, just because for some reason I think psychology gets lumped over into mathematics and reasoning a lot more than sociology does, for reasons unknown to sociologists. But in terms of the initial observations, our students were really excited and interested to be in the project. So our students were the participants, and we went through a lengthy IRB process, HRPP, in order to get approved to conduct research on our own students. So we were very worried that our students might feel like guinea pigs, or they might feel like we're using their class time to do something else. But I think, the students who were giving out the surveys might comment on that later. They did really seem genuinely interested, and quite willingly took all of these surveys and did all of this stuff to advance this project. The student research assistants were absolutely instrumental in developing this incredible rapport with our students. They would come in, the students would know their name, hi, how are you? Professor Wolfe and I would leave the room so as not to cause any undue influence, and the students just lit up the room, quite frankly. I think perhaps our students wish the surveys were longer so that they continue this dialogue with our student research assistants. This was not an expected outcome that I had when we started the project, but it was definitely something I feel very grateful that we gained from the experience. Again, time, we were also concerned starting this that if we were taking 10 to 15 minutes of class time to do these brief surveys, we would be losing this valuable class time we have with our students, and we have to get through this amount of content. And I think by the end, both of us, we're still reflecting on the process because we're still in it. But it really has not been a major issue. Taking 10 minutes to kind of do this as a warm-up when they come in the door did not seem to take away from teaching any content during that time, particularly because the graphs were related to topics we were covering at that time. The next point was that iPads generally limit students from texting. And this is really interesting, and I'll just kind of jump down to the next point. So I noticed in my classroom that they didn't want to give the iPads back. And I've been using iPads for a couple years, so has Professor Wolfe. But the really interesting thing was I thought, okay, and we did this learning styles thing, and I took it with the students, and come to find out I'm a kinesthetic learner. Well, I always thought I was a visual learner. And then I realized, okay, well, for me, I like to write when I'm listening or when I'm somewhere and I'm interested in something. And our students like to do this, right? So when I allowed them to keep the iPads and follow along with my lecture I started having them do wikis in class, participate in all these collaborative learning spaces in Blackboard. The entire dynamic of the classroom changed. And it sounds, like wow, but it really was quite transformational, because the students who sometimes had a difficult time stopping this and starting this, taking notes, paying attention, staying in class the entire time, were suddenly on their iPads. Right? And when you use Nearpod, you can lock them in, so they can't be anywhere else. So when you look out there and everyone's on their iPads, you know what they're doing because they're doing what you tell them to do, right? So, it was a really interesting kind of thing for us to see, I think, how engaged the students were when they were given this iPad, right, to kind of play with in class. I think there was also, in terms of the interest, students were really interested in seeing what Professor Wolfe and I do outside of the classroom, that we were interested in issues related to quantitative reasoning. And I always sort of prefaced it with, this is an issue that concerns everyone in the classroom. At Hostos, 12% of our incoming students are math ready. And so, for almost every student in the room, math has some kind of emotional aspect to it, as well as, just the idea that, oh, we're going to do math, right? We're doing math in sociology. We're doing math in psychology. In terms of the limitations, I could have another session about the IRB process here at CUNY, but I won't. So as some of you know who may have applied, with the system changeover from IRB.net to ID8, there was sort of this vacuum within which our proposal and some others I'd already done got sucked into. And so we were slower getting started than we would have liked to. We actually were prepared and we're ready, and we spent a ton of time over the holiday break trying to hit the ground running, and we did not get approved until April. So, for the application that was ready in the middle of January. So, those things happen, certainly. And, it was really interesting. So we had to compress our study. The initial design was to do bi-weekly pie charts, and we had to do weekly. So, we'll have to really look at our results, and of course we'd like to repeat it again in the fall to see if the sequencing and the time between pie charts makes a difference in terms of student performance. Possible changes, again, might be going over the exercises with students after they were done. Using the pie charts as a teaching tool to really get into them and get students thinking about the data that we showed them in their survey. We did not have time to do that this semester, and we would like to in the fall. And then, as Professor Wolfe said, we did end up having to go paper with some of the later exercises because we didn't want the scrolling to be an issue in terms of how students were reading the data. So we're going to do that for now and hopefully find a better solution as we move forward. Are there any questions?
Oh, and a note before you guys leave, we need those pie charts back.
Okay.
Yeah.
We only have a certain amount of color copies.
Yes,
Is Nearpod a free software?
it is.
It is.
Oh, great.
So Nearpod is really fantastic, and
Yeah.
you're welcome to contact either Professor Wolfe or myself. We've both played with it quite a bit. It just, like any other free app, it has its limitations, and we ran across them this morning.
Right.
Trying to get these links in there for you guys, right? So, I was like, oh, we'll just use Nearpod. It's easy, everyone can access it. And
Right.
once in a while, the app doesn't work on all the iPads, which happened in greater numbers than I've ever seen it happen today.
Yeah.
But it is one reason why, to do our formal study, the one that we had the IRB approval for, we decided to use the Google survey link and then put it in our Blackboard shell,
Right.
because there's no way for it to go wrong.
And Nearpod is great for teaching. You can lock the student's screen and they can
Yeah.
see, and you control what they see, and then you can move back and forth. And
Right.
I've done it lots of times in the classroom. Couldn't make it happen today,
It's great.
but I mean,
Thank
it
you.
works. It's a great tool. Other questions? I know it's kind of weird we morphed from one to another presentation and everything, but any questions about anything we've talked about today? Yes.
Did you have the students in the classes fill out the permission forms to be part of the survey, and so you only would be able to report on the results of those who signed the permissions, and then was that a large percentage of the students?
Do you guys want to talk about informed consent?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, during the first survey, we
Yeah.
already we gave them the informed consent. It's for them to read before they start, and then we inform them that upon reading it, it's up to them. It's not mandatory. It's up to
Right.
them whether they would want to participate or not, and nothing against them if they wouldn't. So they get to keep the informed consent because we would not get their names because it should be anonymous. So it's with them. And then for the next one, we would be asking if there are anybody who have not read the informed consent, and then we give that person an informed consent and explain to them again. So it's a process that we do before we start with the survey. So these guys.
So everyone takes the survey.
They all can
Also,
if they
yeah.
want to, but it's not, they don't have to.
At
Okay.
any time, at any given point, they're allowed to just stop participating.
Right.
So
But
for
did-
example,
did
like-
you find that there were a certain number of students who did not sign the form, and then you wouldn't be able to count their results?
Well, so nobody signed a form,
Yeah.
right? So the way we did our IRB is that it's completely anonymous. So if they were to sign it, then Professor Wolfe and I would know which of our students signed on, right? And we
Right.
didn't want to know that. So like if you were our class, right, we would
Right.
leave the room so that we
Right.
wouldn't be able to see who's doing what, and then the students would direct them where to go, how to do it. But if they sat there with their iPad and wanted to look at the lecture for the day instead of take the survey, totally fine.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, it's strictly verbal consent, no signed forms.
Oh, I see.
They kept the forms for
Oh,
their
I
own
see.
knowledge. Yeah.
You said you were tracking them en masse, right? So
Yeah.
it doesn't really matter who
Correct.
participated.
Right, we're not
Right. 'Cause
looking
we're gonna
at
lose
one
students and-
individual
yeah.
over time, yeah. It's not a longitudinal study per se, it's
Right.
just
I
looking
guess
at.
what I'm asking is, did you get enough students?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
In my class, nobody refused to
Right,
do
I
it, didn't
got it.
want
I
to do
see.
it. So all, I think.
Well, the
most-
initial numbers, I mean, we're looking at about 25 students in each class, give or
Yeah.
take 5.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They're hybrid or,
writing intensive.
like my
mine's
ESL
writing
class is limited to 25. So we're looking at approximately 100 for the whole cohort. So I think from the initial, we had at least 70-ish,
intensive. I think it was almost 80.
almost 80 out of
across,
100.
across 4 classes. So yeah, a small portion of them.
Right.
We're absent even.
Or absent, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so they don't have to do each one, they can do one and not do another one,
Yeah.
and then pick up another one later, so because we're not looking at the individuals, so we don't know who's doing it all.
Do you think it makes a difference to your outcomes if students, for example, participated in the first one and in the last one versus a student who participated in every one?
It might,
Yeah.
but since we're not looking at individual students, we won't really know that from this study.
Right.
We would have to do a confidential study instead of an anonymous study and track individuals over time. So we could do that in the future. We'll think about how we want to rework the study for fall and resubmit an IRB. It's different. And it'll depend, we're going to look at, did their skills get better? Did their attitudes change generally over time? And then we can decide if we want to. I think spacing it out would be helpful, and going over the pie charts with the students would be helpful in increasing their quantitative literacy, which we didn't do because of time constraints. We still have 2 more exercises to do, and so it's going to go into finals week because of the IRB approval in late April.
Well, thank you all for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it.